want you to take these case study tips and run with them so you can create better giant testimonials, which is essentially what a case study is, for your content marketing clients. I'm Mandy Ellis, and I built a six-figure business, and now I help other freelance writers hit five-figure months with dream clients without the burnout, stress, and overwhelm. The very first thing we're talking about is that you need to have an initial call with your client about this case study. Normally, I kind of skip out on calls if I can, unless it's a content strategy project. But for case studies, you need to talk to your client about what is the thing they want to focus on in this project, in this case study. What are the things they definitely want to mention? What are the things you cannot skip when you go through your interview? What are the things that they maybe don't want to highlight? Because sometimes there's different parts of the experience someone might have that they maybe don't want to have all of those things talked about in the case study. They want the case study to focus on maybe 2 or 3 or 4 really important points. Sometimes what ends up happening when you get on this call with a client too is you can suss out important questions they might want you to ask, or details in terms of data, or things that they need to follow up on with that client that they haven't yet, or things about maybe like the design, or hey, we normally do this, can you ask that, or can you put this in the case study? There's a lot of things that I think bring a ton of value to having that initial call with your case study clients, and people skip it. They think that just doing it by email and getting all this stuff is is the way to go. But for me, I think the best way to really get a good pulse on this case study, because it is a really important marketing asset for your clients, is to get on a call, ask questions, know what you should and shouldn't ask about, or know things that your client has been working with their case study subject for quite some time. So you need some background information, and trying to distill a lot of that information into an email can be a big pain in the butt. So being able to get on that call and get information about the background, the history, the transformation essentially that your case study client or your case study subject has gotten from your client is really important. And just getting kind of an overall feel for what they want to do with the case study can be really important. Number 2, when you get on that call with the case study subject, the one that the case study is about, I have about 3 to 4 pages of questions. It can take about an hour to get through those, but you need to ask a lot of specific questions. You can't just be like, tell me about your experience with blah, blah, blah client, right? You really need to go through the different sections of a case study. I think a lot of times when people do a case study, they limit their questions to a page, or they don't cover enough topics. You need to go through each phase in your questions of the interview that you do with that case study subject. Where did we start? Why were we looking for a different solution? What was going wrong? How did we actually end up with this client in the first place? And then where were we starting to get that transformation? What were the things that changed? How did we end up starting to see results? And then we go into what those results actually were. What were the results that that client actually saw? What were the things, the very specific things that that client, like numbers, data, hard evidence of the transformation? And that's why usually your client is asking this case study subject to come in, is because they have hard numbers and they have data and they can talk about the transformation. And then the last piece is like, what is the future, or where are they going? What is the next step? Is there anything they would change? Is there any feedback? We need to have multiple different sections of questions. And like I said, I have 3 to 4 pages of questions, not double spaced, just questions that I ask on a case study interview. And I ask very specific pointed questions to make sure I'm getting as much information as possible. And usually it's pretty rare that I have to go back for a case study and ask more questions or do another interview, because these questions are so thorough. So when you're doing a case study, instead of treating the interview as like a point of tension or you're nervous about it, really think about like, how do I get the best information out of this case study subject? Like, how do I really zero in on the things that my client talked about in that kickoff call we had? Or what have I noticed from the research I've done from my client and this case study subject to ensure that we're getting to the heart of the thing that they were struggling with and the transformation my client helped them get? So these specific questions, especially if you are coming from journalism or you have a magazine background or you've done a lot of interviews, this is where you should shine. I know that a lot of times when people move from journalism or editorial jobs into content marketing, they're really nervous, but case studies are really where they shine. It is getting to the heart of the matter. It feels a little bit, sometimes a little bit nerve wracking in terms of like when you normally do editorial or journalism content, you try to be as unbiased as possible. Case studies are not unbiased. They are as biased as you get. It is a testimonial. So at first it might feel a little weird, but getting down to the meat and bones and asking those specific questions is really critical. And that is where your journalism experience, your editorial experience shines. And creating the case study is really fun. It's really digging into the storytelling. It's really digging into that. And if you are someone who is a journalist, or you are working in editorial or magazines, or you really want to move into content marketing and you're not really sure how to run a business that might do content marketing or strategy or copywriting, I would love for you to check out my 7-day email course, Unskippable. You can go to mandyllis.com/skip. And since you are coming from YouTube, you get 50% off. So you can get it for $47. But these are the 7 essential lessons that you need to turn biz pains and plateaus into client gains and dough with bread and butter formulas. These are the unshakable foundation of your business. These are the things that when times are tough or times are great, these are the pieces you rely on, these 7 lessons. So after working with hundreds of students, I know that these are the pieces that really build your business. And especially if you're coming from magazines that can work quite differently than content marketing clients, and you really want to build that part of your business to have more stability, Unskippable is a really good fit for you. So if you go to mandyllis.com/skip, you can grab it for 50% off at $47, and you can put those 7 foundational lessons in place to actually get more clients, actually get those client gains and dough, and really set your business up for long-term stability. And that's our third thing. Is you need to use specific storytelling language. This is not just barfing dry data at people where you are like, oh, they got a 50% return on ROI, or they cut down this thing by 10%. Like, this is telling the story of shedding their skin, essentially. So they were like starting at this place. It was really difficult and itchy and uncomfortable. They were looking for solutions. Now they found a new solution. As they're transitioning into this new solution, maybe they're like, I'm not sure if this is going to work yet. Oh my gosh, I don't know. There's still a lot of like nerve-wracking energy. Then they get into like, oh my gosh, it's actually working. We're getting results. All this cool stuff is happening. It is relieving our stress. It is relieving, it is helping us save money. It is helping us get to the next level as a business. And then now we see a future with this client, right? We see a future working with them because here's all this great stuff in this essentially case study testimonial, right? So you need to use specific storytelling language. You can't just let it go kind of limp. The whole point of the case study is that case studies are kind of built to convert people. When people are asking for a case study or they look at a case study, they are looking for someone like them who got results with your client. They are not they are not just perusing a blog post, they're not just downloading a freebie. They are like, tell me about someone like me who got the results I want. I want to read the story. And that's the point of the case study, is to draw them through the story of transformation, the story of shedding their skin so they can start anew and really have better results across their business. So if you end up just kind of barfing data, or you kind of just tell information, you don't show, you tell, it ends up making the case study really boring and difficult to read, and it doesn't convert as well as it's supposed to. It ends up being this difficult thing that you could have just written a regular testimonial and been in better shape than that. So focus on specific storytelling language. Again, this is really great for journalists who are moving into content marketing, or people who worked a lot of editorial and magazines moving into content marketing. This is kind of weaving together all of those puzzle pieces into a place that really tells the story of change. That's an important piece. I think when I've read case studies that rely too heavily on just barfing data, or saying, well, this was this thing and now it's this, and just telling rather than showing, it ends up being really difficult to get through. And then people just skim it and they don't actually retain the information. They don't actually reach out to your client to move forward. They're just like, okay, sounds nice. But if you can draw them in to the thing that is them, right? Like, you are telling a story of a company like theirs getting success with your client. That makes a huge difference. That is a big deal. So this is our case study things. I don't want to go too far into it because we don't need a ton of things to just make a case study shine. We really need to focus on a few specifics. Next time, we are going to talk about how to write better emails for your clients, whether those are newsletters or those are drip campaigns, or you are working on different parts of emails for your clients. We are going to go in that. So next time, we'll talk about emails, but I hope that this was helpful, and I will see you next time.